Hi, this is part 3 of my deep dive into Camp X, the top secret spy/special ops training school built on the shores of Lake Ontario during World War II. This camp was set up in order to train agents to parachute in behind enemy lines to do things like make contact with local resistance networks, set up communications, and actual physical sabotage. So you can imagine that they wanted to find out pretty quickly if you were the right person for the job. This is very, very dangerous work. Life expectancies were not that high, and not everybody's cut out for it. That's okay. Nothing to be ashamed of. Not something we could all do. So when you got to the school, priority number 1 was figuring out if you had kind of like the foundational personality to do it. So they put recruits or potential recruits through a series of 3 tests. And they describe these tests. So I'm thinking to myself, like, I wonder if I would have passed these tests. What is it, do you think, that they're looking for? Well, they're obviously looking for some degree of intellectual capability, the ability to observe and process information and adapt as the situation calls for it. Because if you can't adapt when you're behind enemy lines, you are probably completely screwed. Secondly, they're looking for people who can handle pressure, because the pressure is immense. You can't be thrown off by some Gestapo walking down the street. And they're also probably looking for people who have what you call courage, like people who are afraid but are able to power through that and do it anyway. So when you got to the school, the first thing they did was they had a welcome dinner. Now, people were usually trained in I want to say cultural or ethnic groups. So if they were training Americans, the whole group would be Americans. They also had groups of Hungarians or Yugoslavians that would come through Camp X. So you were kind of trained in a group of people who were from the same place you were. So they had this welcome dinner. And of course, it's foods that maybe are from your country, and the wine and the alcohol is available. So the first test is, how much do you drink? Because if you drink a lot, you are a liability and you are kicked out right then. And I get that, right? So I'm I would have passed that test, because I've learned over time, you do not drink a lot in professional situations, right? A, you end up saying things that are totally ridiculous. And B, it dulls your senses, right? It slows down your reaction time. So it makes you really vulnerable. So if anybody at the welcome dinner drank, they didn't say how much, what was the cutoff, but I'm assuming more than a glass that you sip to kind of you gotta blend in, right? Then you're gone. Okay, done. I've passed that one. The second thing they do is they put you in a room in chairs kind of equally spaced apart, and then an instructor would go to the front and shoot a Tommy gun with live ammunition down in between the chairs. And I guess this is to test your ability to react under pressure, because that's scary, right? I don't know if I would have passed that test. I've not had a lot of experience being around live ammunition, but I feel I would have had the instinct to say, just sit here and deal with it. Don't get up, don't move your hand down the aisle. And so I guess if you could self-select at that point, if it freaked you out, you were gone. But also they were probably judging the way people reacted in that scenario. And then the third thing that they did was they brought you out. So Camp X was, like I said, it was on Lake Ontario. And for those of you who don't know, the North Shore of Lake Ontario, the part that is in Canada, there's a lot of bluffs. It's not a ton of, flat beaches. And so they'd take you out to the bluffs. The word bluff, they didn't say exactly how high or where exactly they were, so I couldn't look it up. But a bluff is a bluff. It's high. And they'd bring you out to the bluffs, and they put you about 50 feet from the edge. And you can see, right? You're standing there, you can see the edge, and then you can see the water. And the difference between the two, you can make some sort of judgment about, how approximately high you are at the edge of this bluff. And the instructor would say, when I say go, you run right to the edge and right over. It's I'm reading that, and I'm what? And then that was it. He'd be go. And then And if you hesitated too long, if you stopped and asked a question why the hell are we doing this? That was it. You were gone. You were done. So that's how that was the first 12 hours. And if you didn't pass all those tests, you were out. Now, if you were Canadian or American or British, I'm assuming you just went back to your operational unit. But if you were a foreign national from maybe a country that, like, you know, they weren't entirely sure about, then you got sent to the POW camp in Alberta to sit out the rest of the war, because now that you knew about Camp X, they couldn't take the risk that you'd go tell people. So that is the story of how they would screen people out immediately at Camp X. And I don't know, I guess it worked. Guess they got enough recruits to jump over the edge of the cliff. Just to be clear, apparently they put bales of hay, so, you know, nobody died at that point. Anyways, I got a little bit more on Camp X coming. There's so many interesting parts of that place that I'm going to dive into it a bit more. For people who are asking, this is the guy, this is one of his books that I'm reading. I get them all from the library. He's got a whole bunch, but he's the Canadian authority on Camp X for sure. He's put together a lot of really good research material. So questions or comments, anything else particularly you want to know about it, let me know. Otherwise, as always, I hope everyone's doing okay today.